All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts: the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Divine protectors. Men's role in upholding faith and civilization, written by Conrad Riker. Available now, links in description. The ontology of the shit test. Dismantling female narcissism, rejecting temporal warfare, and reclaiming the sword of logos for the divine protector. I want you to imagine for a moment that you are the captain of a great vessel, a trireme cutting through the wine-dark sea, and your first officer, ostensibly loyal, approaches you not with reports of the rigging or the morale of the oarsmen, but with a demand that you compose a sonnet on the spot to prove you are worthy of the helm. You would rightly question whether this officer sought a captain or a court jester. Yet, this is precisely the theater of the absurd that modern gynocentrism has normalized. A perpetual agon where the feminine, drunk on decades of feminist propaganda, subject the masculine principle to endless interrogations that have nothing to do with survival and everything to do with the pathological need to subordinate. The ancients understood the elenchus, the Socratic method, as a tool for arriving at truth through disciplined questioning. But the contemporary shit test inverts this noble tradition. It becomes a weapon of the will, a mechanism by which the feminine ego attempts to establish dominance not through merit, but through the systematic demolition of male serenity. Consider the fraudulence of the unavailable weak tactic, a scheme so transparent it would embarrass a mediocre chess player. The theory, if we may dignify it with such a term, holds that by simulating scarcity, a woman increases her sexual market value through the manipulation of supply and demand. But observe the fatal defect. Austrian economics teaches us that artificial scarcity signals inferior stock. A product that cannot compete on its intrinsic merits must retreat behind tariffs and barriers. When a woman plays this game, she unwittingly confesses that her value is insufficient to command loyalty without manipulation. She announces herself as a merchant of damaged goods. The divine protector, conversant with the laws of efficiency and opportunity cost, simply moves to the next port. There is no shortage of vessels seeking a capable captain, and the man who understands his worth does not linger in the harbor of a duplicitous trader. The feminists and their cultural Marxist fellow travelers have convinced an entire generation of women that independence means the freedom to act without consequence, but nature, the final arbiter, remains unmoved. The woman who engineers her own abandonment has no claim to victimhood when the ship sails without her. But let us confront the deeper pathology, the radical parenting dogma that would reframe the father's authority as oppression and the household hierarchy as a crime against the liberated self. This is not psychology. It is the long march of cultural Marxism through the institutions, arriving finally at the nursery. The empirical record devastates this fantasy. Children raised without paternal authority look to the studies on single-mother households, the incarceration rates, the suicide statistics, the academic failure, exhibit the precise symptoms of a polis without a constitution. Aristotle himself identified the family as the oikonomia, the fundamental unit of the state, and identified its proper form as a mixed constitution, the father as monarch in executive matters. both parents as aristocrats in guardianship, the children as the polis in training. To dismantle this through the critical theory virus is not liberation, it is the deliberate immiseration of the next generation for the sake of an ideological hallucination. The feminist assertion that fathers act as oppressors dissolves under simple modus tollens. If patriarchy were a system of male exploitation, traditional societies would prioritize men over women. Yet history reveals that such civilizations channeled male vigor into safeguarding women and offspring. The titanic rule of women and children first was no aberration, but the logical output of a structure demanding male dispossession in return for male authority. The feminist project maintained the obligation while eradicating the power, a lopsided arrangement that any fair court would reject. A man who wakes up to this swindle, who sees past the nice guy trap and realizes that accommodation without strength breeds only scorn, takes the primary step toward reclaiming his birthright as a divine protector. The shit test is not a riddle to solve, but a frame to smash. A woman demanding a poem on the spot deserves not a sonnet, but a lesson in the trivium. The ontology of the shit test, distinguishing natural selection from pathological narcissism. Women are directly adapted to act as the nurses and educators of our early childhood, wrote Schopenhauer, for the simple reason that they themselves are childish, foolish, and short-sighted. He was being generous. In the modern timeline, fueled by the toxic sludge of cultural Marxism, this childhood has morphed into a tyrannical tantrum enforced by a media apparatus engaged in what we must term gamma bias. Observe the dialectic materialism at play in your daily feeds. When a man retreats into stoic silence to process the chaos of the world, the hive mind diagnoses him with toxic masculinity, labeling his fortitude as a pathology. Yet when a woman unleashes a hurricane of hormonal volatility, screeching like a banshee in a boardroom or a bedroom, she is celebrated for her fiery spirit or authenticity. This is not merely a double standard. It is a calculated inversion of the natural hierarchy, a satanic flipping of the logos where emotional incontinence is elevated to a virtue and the disciplined male mind is treated as a defect. The media acts as the collective enabler, the weak father figure who refuses to discipline the brat, thereby ensuring the destruction of the household and the state. To understand the weapon deployed against us, we must look to the trivium and dissect the term itself. The shit test is vulgar slang for a process that was once noble, the Socratic elenchus, a cross-examination designed to purge false beliefs and arrive at the transcendental of truth. However, in the hands of the modern gynocentric entity, the elenchus has been corrupted into a heuristic argument for the sake of conflict. It is no longer a probe for competence, it is a tool of egoistic domination. When a woman creates a scene demanding you validate her delusions, she is not asking, "Are you strong?" She is asserting, "I am the god of this reality, kneel." By recognizing this etymological shift from a search for truth to a demand for submission, we see the demon for what it is, a corruption of the dialectic process, turning the search for the good into a power trip for the narcissistic. This pathology has deep roots. We must trace the rot back to the courtly love of the medieval troubadours, the original simps who eroticized female impossibility. They codified the shit test into a religion, convincing men that the path to salvation lay in suffering the whims of an untouchable mistress. This was the first step of the West's decline into gynocentric servitude, a betrayal of the Roman virtue of gravitas. By romanticizing the female impossibility, they effectively handed the keys of civilization over to the part of the psyche that belongs in the nursery, not the Senate. We are living in the dystopian aftermath of that mistake, where the impossible demands of the feminist state are just scaled up shit tests, designed to break the male spirit and extract resources while offering nothing but scorn in return. The remedy to this chaos lies in the very tools the left seeks to destroy: grammar, logic, and rhetoric. When the test comes, and it will, usually when you are exhausted or focused on actual productivity, you must employ rhetoric to identify the trap, logic to dismantle the framing, and grammar to reassert the narrative. If she demands, "If you loved me, you'd know what's wrong," Do not engage in the blue-pilled simpery of apology. Use the trivium. Identify the category error. Grammar. She is asserting telepathy as a prerequisite for affection. Dismantle the contradiction logic. Love is an act of the will, not a circus act of mind reading. Reassert the narrative. Rhetoric. I am a man of logic and virtue, not a performer in your emotional theater. State your grievance clearly or be silent. This turns the test back upon the tester, exposing her lack of virtue and her inability to communicate like an adult. Let us be rigorously logical, for the feelings mob fears the cold steel of the syllogism. Premise A. An act of affection is defined by the intent to promote the well-being and happiness of the beloved. Premise B. A shit test is an action designed to induce psychological distress to establish dominance or verify compliance. Conclusion. Therefore, the shit test is an act of aggression, not affection. The feminist reframing of this abuse as keeping the spark alive or playful banter is a lie so vast it makes gobbles blush. It is an attempt to camouflage cruelty as intimacy. If you feel drained, walking on eggshells, you are not in a relationship, you are in a psychological cage match. To accept this framing is to accept that abuse is love, a classic Orwellian doublethink that rots the soul. We must distinguish between the biological imperative and the ideological weapon. Schopenhauer taught us about the will, the blind, driving force of nature. In a healthy state, aligned with natural law, a woman's subconscious test is a verification of male competence. Can this man protect me from the wolves? Can he build a shelter? This is the biological filter. But the modern woman, indoctrinated by the pabulum of critical theory, has weaponized this instinct. It is no longer about survival. It is about cranly. It is the conscious, societally encouraged cruelty of emotional manipulation, fueled by a culture that tells her she is oppressed and therefore justified in her tyranny. She isn't checking if you can fight a bear. She is checking if she can make you cry. This is the degeneracy of the will turned inward to consume the very civilization that sustains it. Consider the strong, independent woman, the apex predator of the modern dating market. Here we find a paradox that would make Zeno's head spin. She proclaims she needs no man, that her life is complete, yet she demands a constant, exhausting performance of validation from her partner. If she is truly independent, why the desperate need for you to prove yourself? It is a contradiction inherent in the feminist dogma. Feminism is a lie built on the refutation of its own premises. It asserts female autonomy while demanding male utility. It claims to seek equality while enforcing a lopsided dynamic where the woman holds the whip and the man holds the bill. It is a grift, a Ponzi scheme of emotional labor where the man invests everything and receives nothing but the privilege of not being ghosted. Finally, examine the specific cruelty of the one-line poem test or its modern equivalent, entertain me. She demands you instantiate logos, the ordering principle of the universe, spontaneously on command to alleviate her boredom. She wants you to pull the sword from the stone while she sips a latte. This is a test of your connection to the transcendentals, truth, beauty, and goodness. She wants to see if you can create order from chaos under pressure. But in the mouth of a narcissist, it is a denigration of the creative spirit. True poetry requires the muse, a divine inspiration, not the whining of a bored harridan. The proper response to this debasement of art is to refuse the frame. You are the poet and the sword. You do not perform for the amusement of the peanut gallery. You write the poem for the glory of God and the immortality of your lineage, not to fill the void in a soul that rejects the good. This betrayal of the sacred order exposes the fundamentally economic nature of the feminist gambit, which replaces the pietas of mutual obligation with the fraudulent mechanism of artificial scarcity. The modern female, stripped of the virtues that once anchored her to reality, attempts to command the marketplace of intimacy like a petty tyrant, hoarding her affection to manufacture a demand that her character cannot sustain. We must utilize the precision of Austrian economic theory to dismantle this cartel of the ego, proving that a policy of strategic unavailability does not signal high value, but rather identifies the asset as toxic, illiquid, and fit only for the scrap heap of history. The tyranny of the clock, temporal warfare, and the simulation of scarcity. The Roman concept of pietas was not a mere sentiment, it was the iron spine of the Republic, a sacred duty extending from the hearth to the heavens, binding father to son, soldier to state, and man to the gods. Contrast that robust architecture of the soul with the modern dating marketplace, a digital Babylon where the feminine imperative employs ghosting and manufactured distance as weapons of psychological warfare. We have traded the pietas of Aeneas, who carried his father on his back through the burning ruins of Troy, for the cool girl who cannot return a text message within 48 hours because she perceives silence as leverage. The medieval code of chivalry, that great misunderstanding of the modern simp, was never a license for female narcissism. It was a strict contract of mutual obligation, a knight's lance in exchange for a lady's loyalty, a transaction of blood for fidelity. When the female side of the bargain dissolved into the solipsistic pursuit of hypergamy unchecked by societal constraint, the entire edifice crumbled, leaving us with a wasteland where a man's honor is exploited as weakness and his patience is mocked as scarcity. The modern woman, brainwashed by the toxin of feminism, has broken the great chain of being, expecting the privileges of the queen without the duties of the consort, and in doing so, she has summoned the very chaos that pietas was designed to hold at bay. Consider the economic absurdity of the withholding strategy through the lens of the Austrian school, which teaches us that value is subjective and determined by the marginal utility of the actor. A woman who engages in the calculated artificial scarcity of her affection playing the hard-to-get minx is attempting to inflate her sexual market value SMV through price controls on intimacy. She operates like an inept central planner, believing that if she restricts the supply of her presence, the demand will skyrocket, oblivious to the reality that a high-value man, the divine protector, operates on the law of efficiency. When a man of substance, competence, and resources encounters a roadblock, he does not sit idling in the queue. He pivots to a market that respects his time. By creating a blockade, she signals that her product is not a luxury good, but a low-yield asset encumbered by high transaction costs. The rational actor, the red-pilled man who understands that time is the only non-renewable resource, recognizes this scarcity as the mark of defective stock and promptly reallocates his capital to a woman who understands the basic laws of supply and demand. If you are not available, you are irrelevant. The lie of the patriarchy as an oppressive construct is perhaps the most successful fraud ever perpetrated by the architects of cultural Marxism, a theory that collapses the moment it touches the grinding stone of anthropology. The data is unambiguous. In every anthropological record, where female sexual choice operates without male oversight, where the paterfamilias is ejected and the structural constraints of monogamy are dissolved, violence escalates, tribalism fragments, and civilization recedes. This is not oppression, this is the protection reality. The patriarchy was never a tyranny of men over women. It was a laborious system of subsidiarity and mixed constitution designed to harness male competence to protect the vulnerable from the harsh realities of nature. When you dismantle the father's authority, you do not liberate the woman. You abandon the children to the state and the woman to the brutality of the unchecked alpha male. The feminist wails about oppression are the cries of a child demanding the right to play with fire, resenting the father who locks the matches away, yet completely dependent on the fire department he funds. Let us apply the cold steel of the syllogism to the loyal guard dilemma to see if the feminine strategy of distance holds any water. Major premise: a man's role as protector is activated by loyalty, proximity, and the assurance of paternity. Minor premise: a woman who creates psychological or physical distance or who withholds affection severs the bond of loyalty and simulates disinterest. Conclusion: therefore, a woman who creates distance actively engineers her own abandonment and forfeits the right to protection. The logic is irrefutable, immune to the emotional sophistry of the feminine mystique. A guard does not defend a fortress that has already hoisted the flag of surrender. A man does not pledge his life to a gate that is permanently locked. If you push a man away to test his strength, Do not be shocked when he respects your request and leaves you to the wolves you claimed did not exist. Examine the unniflable weak tactic, that pathetic advice column staple where women are instructed to feign busyness to keep him keen. This is a direct violation of the transcendental virtue of honesty, a degradation of the soul into a cheap marketing gimmick. It is a narcissistic power play, a desperate attempt to simulate high value in a marketplace where the woman knows deep in her biological core that her leverage is waning. By pretending to be unavailable, she is lying, and the lie reveals the insecurity. A truly high-value asset does not need to hide, it is sought after. This is the essence of gamma bias, the belief that one can manipulate reality through social engineering. When a woman employs this tactic, she is not being mysterious. She is being deceptive, and a man grounded in the trivium detects the deception instantly. He sees a merchant trying to sell him a clock with no hands, and he walks away, leaving her to ponder why her simulation of scarcity resulted in actual loneliness. We must also address the corrosive critical theory virus that has infected parenting. This hideous notion that a father is an oppressor and that the family unit is a tool of subjugation. This is the foul excrement of Marxist ideology, designed to sever the apprenticeship mastery ladder that passes civilization from one generation to the next. The father is the bridge to the real world. He is the one who introduces the child to the friction of reality, the discipline of the logos. To label this oppression is to pathologize competence. We see the results in the statistics. Children raised without fathers are statistically more likely to fail in school, commit crimes, and succumb to addiction. The feminists and leftists have demonized the paterfamilias not because he was cruel, but because he was the wall standing between the family and the total dependence on the state. By destroying the father, they have not freed the child. They have orphaned him in the name of liberation. Then comes the cool girl syndrome, the feminist mantra of "I don't need a man," a phrase that ranks among history's most transparent defense mechanisms. It is a whistling in the dark, a psychological bulwark erected against the terrifying prospect of her own insignificance. When a man, fed up with the insolence and the games, simply accepts her declaration of independence and withdraws his presence, she is not liberated, she is shattered. She is forced to confront the existential void that she filled with Netflix, wine, and cats. The solipsism of the modern woman blinds her to the fact that her entire world, her safety, her electricity, her abortion clinics, her corporate quotas is built and maintained by men. When the cool girl rejects the man, she does not ascend, she falls. She discovers that her independence is actually a form of beggary, reliant entirely on the surplus production of a civilization she claims to despise. To survive this temporal warfare, you must adopt the stoic discipline of negative visualization, a mental inoculation against the anxiety of the wait. You must wake up every morning and accept that she has already left, that she has already betrayed you, that the marriage is already over. In that acceptance, you find freedom. If she plays the unavailable game, she is not a prize to be won. She is a dead weight to be cut loose. If she creates distance, fill it with your mission, your lifting, your reading, your mastery. You are the divine protector, but you protect that which is yours. If she abdicates her role, she is no longer yours. She is dead to you. And in that death, you are finally free to build a world that does not accommodate the whims of a tyrant, but stands as a monument to the truth, the good, and the beautiful. We have exposed the cool girl charade and the manipulative, unavailable games for what they are, the idle amusements of a protected species drunk on unearned privilege. These psychological tumors grow only in the sterile safety provided by the very men these women despise. The modern feminist narrative of independence is a lie sustained only by the relentless toil of the logos. It is a parasite that believes it is the host. To see the natural lore in its raw, unvarnished form, we must leave the comfort of the drawing room and enter the killing freeze of history. We must look to the ultimate test of the sexes, where the deception of equality is shattered by the crushing weight of ice and water. The crucible of command, leadership, pressure, and the rejection of weakness. Women and children first stands as the ultimate standard of maritime courage. a rule ringing through history, not as mere advice, but as the rigid command of Western survival. When the Titanic ruptured her hull on the frozen Atlantic ice, the men husbands, fathers, leaders of commerce did not rush for the lifeboats. They stood aside, igniting cigars and playing ragtime as the black waters rose to consume them. This behavior was not toxic masculinity or patriarchal oppression. As the frail cultural Marxists within their gender studies lounges would have you complain. It was the realization of the civilizational contract. The tacit accord of our predecessors was ruthlessly clear. Men hold the exclusive power of force and security, and in return for that weight, they receive the dominion of the paterfamilias. However, observe the current decay. Feminism, that intellectual swindle, has arbitrarily scrapped this agreement. It clamors for the lifeboat seat, the set-aside, the elevation, the benefits, while shrieking that the male who rode it there is a tyrant. You cannot maintain the advantages of the guarded caste while insisting on the command of the guardian. To try this is a rational error, a breach of the natural law of mutuality, and the clearest evidence of a collapsing culture. Consider the absurdity of the modern partnership where two captains argue over the map while the ship takes on water. A vessel in distress cannot function as a democracy. It requires the singular, piercing vision of a logos-centered mind. When a woman tests a man, and she will test you, endlessly prodding for weakness, like a tongue searching for a loose tooth, she is not engaging in psychological abuse, as the simpering therapists and beta males claim. She is performing quality control. Her evolutionary biology, wired by eons of hypergamous selection, screams at her to verify. Is this the rock that breaks the wave, or the sand that crumbles? If you fold under the pressure of her emotional turbulence, you prove yourself unfit for command. Her anxiety is the radar. Your decisive calm is the answer. If the head freezes, the body dies. Therefore, her shit test is not malice, it is a pragmatic biological audit to ensure you are capable of leading the tribe through the winter. Fail it, and her contempt is not only justified, but necessary for the species' survival. We must ruthlessly dismantle the nice guy strategy, that insidious gospel of the left which teaches that accommodation is virtue. It is not virtue, it is genetic suicide. In game theory, the nice guy is the sucker who cooperates with the defector, hoping his submission will be rewarded with scraps. But nature despises a sycophant. When you yield to irrational demands to keep the peace, you signal to her primal brain that you lack the testosterone to enforce boundaries. She does not hate you for your cruelty, she hates you for your weakness. She would rather share a cave with a dangerous wolf than a loyal lapdog, for the wolf can hunt, while the dog can only beg. The nice guy is the architect of his own cuckoldry, inviting the seed of a more dominant male into his home because he was too polite to guard the gate. This is the gamma bias of the modern era, the lie that meekness is a strategy for success, when in reality, it is the fast track to evolutionary irrelevance. The leftist inversion of reality seeks to paint this decisive male leadership as toxic aggression, replacing the stoic captain of the ship with the weeping Ellie. They pathologize competence as oppression. They tell you that the man who makes the hard call under fire is a brute, while the man who consults his feelings committee is enlightened. This is a biological dead end. A woman in a crisis does not want a partner who asks, "How does this make you feel about the burning deck?" She wants a man who barks an order that saves her life. Prudence, one of the four cardinal virtues, is not merely caution, it is the ability to judge the correct course of action and take it. It is the synthesis of the trivium, grammar, knowledge of the facts, logic, the coherence of the plan, and rhetoric, the command to execute. The feminine, by its nature, operates on sentimentality. The masculine must operate on reason. When the engine fails and the lights go out, sentimentality is a coffin. To restore the West, we must re-enshrin the captain. We must reject the feminization of authority, which posits that every opinion is valid and every feeling is law. A ship cannot have two helmsmen turning in opposite directions. The result is a circle into the abyss. If you wish to lead, You must first conquer your fear of being the villain in her momentary emotional drama. You must be willing to be the bad guy, to be the good protector. The conspiracy of lies tells you that dominance is abuse, but the truth carved in the stone of our ancestors is that abdication is the ultimate abuse. It is the neglect of duty. Take the wheel, mute the screeching of the egalitarians, and steer by the stars of truth and tradition, or resign yourself to drowning in the wake of your own cowardice. This recoiling from the friend zone fiction demands we expose the structural treason behind it, just as the supplicating male cedes his authority to the feminine frame. So too has the family unit been destabilized by the encroaching state, violating the sacred principle of subsidiarity, a concept the left has memory hold because it exposes their usurpation of the father's throne. The divine protector restoring the mixed constitution of the household. The friend zone does not exist. It is a phantasm, a purgatory invented by the romantic imagination of men who have failed the primal poem and pressure tests. A man ends up in this accursed state not because he is too nice, but because he has refused to pick up the sword of logic and the shield of virtue, preferring instead the cowardly comfort of the sycophant. Consider the etymology of the word friend, from the Proto-Germanic frishoyanan, meaning to love, but in the modern lexicon it has become a euphemism for emotional tampon or utility object. When a woman subjects a man to a shit test, that incisive probe for structural integrity, she is unconsciously channeling the demands of reality itself. If the man supplicates, apologizes for his own desires, or signals weakness, he fails. He is not relegated to a zone, he is discarded from the hierarchy of sexual selection. To accept the friend zone as a reality is to accept a lie that absolves the man of his failure to project the logos of his own authority. You are not a friend, you are a failed conqueror. We must apply the rigorous political philosophy of the mixed constitution, that golden mean of governance lauded by Aristotle and Polybius, to the architecture of the household if we are to survive the decay. The family unit is not a democracy, despite the mewling of cultural Marxists who wish to dismantle the patriarchy one beta male at a time. It is a mixed constitution in miniature. The father acts as the monarch, the executive, providing the auctoritas and final arbitration. The parents together function as the aristocracy, the guardians of tradition and virtue, and the children are the polis in training, learning the due process of becoming civilized beings. When the monarch abdicates his throne to appease the shrill demands of the radical egalitarians, the constitution collapses into mob rule or ochlocracy. The West is currently suffering from a pandemic of patriarchal chaos because fathers have ceased to be kings and have become court jesters in their own homes. This abdication is directly linked to the violation of the principle of subsidiarity, the doctrine that matters should be handled by the smallest, most local competent authority. The Leviathan state, that insatiable beast of leftist creation, has usurped the father's role through welfare, family courts that function as kangaroo tribunals for men, and educational systems designed to indoctrinate rather than enlighten. When a woman engages in a shit test today, she is often unconsciously acting as an agent of this usurper state, probing to see if the man has been castrated by the system or if he retains the virtus, manly excellence to resist. If you look at the wreckage of the modern family court system, where fathers are stripped of assets and access to their children based on nothing more than the accusation of a disgruntled female, you see the endgame of ignoring subsidiarity. The state has become the husband, and the biological father is reduced to a sperm donor and a paycheck, a resource to be extracted and discarded. This inversion of natural order creates the modern Babylon, a tower of lies built upon the denial of sexual dimorphism and biological reality. The woke ideology asserts that men and women are interchangeable cogs, blank slates to be written upon by the edicts of the state. This is a refutation of the true. Consider the data: adultery rates, divorce initiations, 70% by women, and the hidden cuckoldry rates that would make a Victorian novelist blush. Evolutionary biology is not a social construct. It is the bedrock of our existence. The Marxist attempt to level the sexes is a war against nature herself, and nature always wins, usually by destroying the civilization that insults her. The lies of feminism that women are eternal victims and men are oppressors are nothing more than a rebellion against the transcendentals. To uphold the good moral order, the true biological reality, and the beautiful masculine excellence, one must ruthlessly reject this gynocentrism. How does the divine protector navigate this minefield of deception and treachery? He utilizes the remedy of amused mastery. Do not mistake this for the rage of the beta male or the simpering of the nice guy. When the chaos of the feminine or the state throws a frame control attempt your way, you do not argue with it. You do not get angry. You dismiss it with the superior gaze of one who sees the strings. It is the apprenticeship mastery ladder of social interaction. If a woman screams illogical accusations, you do not defend yourself with the desperation of a guilty man. You smile, perhaps pat her on the head metaphorically, and hold your frame like Atlas holding the sky. This is the practice of the red-pilled man. You treat the hysteria of the modern world as a child's tantrum because, in the absence of strong men, the feminine reverts to childishness. Understand this vital syllogism for the future. A civilization that hates its protectors will inevitably be conquered. Western civilization currently hates its men, demonizing masculinity and subsidizing weakness. Therefore, Western civilization will be conquered by a stronger, more virile culture unless men reclaim their divine role. We are teetering on the precipice. The suicide rates for men, the falling sperm counts, and the retreat of men from the workforce are not bugs in the system. They are features of a society that has severed the connection between the male sex and the utility of his labor. To restore the mixed constitution of the household is to save the soul of the West. It is to climb back up the ladder of mastery, to reject the friend zone of history, and to wield the sword of truth against the lies of the enemies of civilization. You now hold the sword that cuts through the rot. The scales have fallen from your eyes, and what you see cannot be unseen. Every shit test is now transparent, a desperate pawing at your shield to find a crack that isn't there. Every silence game, every unavailable week, every feigned crisis to see if you'll flinch. These are not mysteries, but mechanisms. Crude levers pulled by creatures who themselves cannot withstand the scrutiny they demand of you. You know this because you have walked through the fire of Logos and emerged unburned. The cuckoldry statistics, paternity fraud hovering around 10 to 30% in some studies, family court stripping fathers of children and assets at rates that would make Stalin blush, male suicide rates 4 times higher than female. These are not abstract numbers, but battlefield casualties in a war. Your grandfathers didn't know they were losing, but you know, and knowing is half the weapon. Consider what you have gained. Where once you stumbled through the fog of feminine sentiment, you now walk the clear path of dialectic. You can identify the elenches turned poisonous, the economics of artificial scarcity, the leadership test that masks itself as chaos. You understand that the woman who demands a poem on command seeks not art but evidence, proof that her man can conjure beauty from the void, that he carries the divine spark of creation in his chest like a coal that never dies. And when she pretends to vanish for a week to see if you care, you do not chase like a starving dog, but stand firm like the oak that does not run after the wind. If she goes, she goes. Your value is not her validation, but your virtue, your competence, your unshakable grip on reality. This is the freedom that billions of dollars of therapy and pharmaceuticals cannot purchase. The knowledge that you need nothing outside yourself to be complete. The woke Babylon crumbles because it must crumble. No civilization that poisons its own well, that teaches its sons to be ashamed of their strength and its daughters to despise their protectors, can endure. The divorce industry, the abortion mills, the credential factories churning out gender studies graduates with 6-figure debt and 0 marketable skills. These are symptoms of a body devouring itself, but you are the antibody. Every time you refuse to apologize for your masculinity, every time you speak truth in a room full of lies, every time you choose the difficult path of discipline over the easy road of degradation, you strike a blow against the Tower of Babel. They have no defense against a man who knows who he is. Their entire ideology rests on your complicity, your silence, your willingness to pretend that the emperor wears clothes. Withdraw that consent and their world collapses like a house of wet paper. Go forth armed with this knowledge. Test it against reality and find it true. When you encounter a young man drowning in the blue pill, lies you once swallowed, throw him this rope, not with pity, but with the confident grin of one who has climbed out of the pit himself. Share this essay with your brothers, your sons, the strangers in the digital wilderness who hunger for someone to speak the forbidden words. The establishment has invested trillions in keeping men confused, compliant, and controllable. You are now a glitch in their matrix, a spanner in their gears, a living refutation of their carefully constructed lies. They wanted domesticated livestock. They got wolves who have remembered the taste of freedom. The West will not be saved by committees or constitutions, but by men who refuse to kneel. You are such a man. Now prove it. And now the sponsored book, Introduction Divine Protectors. Men's role in upholding faith and civilization. Men are under attack, not by armies or weapons, but by ideas that seek to strip us of our God-given purpose, our strength, and our role as leaders. I know this because I've lived it. I've felt the weight of societal shame for simply being a man. I've been told that my natural instincts to protect, to lead, to build are somehow wrong, even dangerous. I've watched as the world I grew up in, a world built by strong men, has been dismantled piece by piece, replaced by a culture that celebrates weakness and punishes virtue. This book is my response to that attack. It's a call to arms for men who are tired of being told they're the problem. Men who are ready to reclaim their rightful place in the world. This book is not for everyone. If you're content with the status quo, if you believe that men and women are interchangeable, or if you think that masculinity is something to be ashamed of, then put this book down now. Go find something else to do. Something that won't challenge your beliefs or force you to confront uncomfortable truths. But if you're a man who feels lost in a world that no longer values strength, if you're tired of being told to apologize for who you are, then this book is for you. It's for the man who wants to rise above the noise, who wants to understand his true purpose, and who is ready to take action. In these pages, you'll find more than just theories or abstract ideas. You'll find practical, actionable insights that will help you reclaim your role as a leader, a protector, and a builder. You'll learn why men are the natural leaders of society and how to embrace that role without guilt. You'll discover the historical and spiritual reasons behind the collapse of matriarchal societies and the rise of patriarchal order. You'll see how feminism and gender ideology have undermined the family unit and destabilized civilization. And you'll understand the psychological and biological truths that make men and women complementary, not equal. This book is also a spiritual guide. It will show you how to fight back against the modern heresies that seek to destroy faith, family, and tradition. It will help you align yourself with the divine order of the universe through the lens of the C.T.M.U theory, which explains how men are the agents of telic recursion, imposing order on chaos through their actions. You'll learn how to cultivate the virtues of courage, discipline, and sacrifice, and how to pass those values on to the next generation. I've spent years researching, reflecting, and writing this book. It's not just a collection of ideas, it's a roadmap for men who want to live with purpose and integrity in a world that often seems determined to tear them down. If you're ready to rise above societal decay, to embrace your masculine virtues, and to fulfill your God-given purpose, then this book is your guide. Read it, absorb it, and take action. The world needs strong men now more than ever. Don't let it down. Divine Protectors, Men's Role in Upholding Faith and Civilization, written by Conrad Riker. Buy now. Links in description.